All right, so today we're going to dive into another Polkadot project that continues to impress, I think, both the industry and also what we're seeing in terms of just new advancements that are really starting to shake up the space around a lot of these parachain auctions that have been rolling. We're going to dive in a little deeper on that with Katie Butler today with Moonbeam. My name is Paul Barron. Welcome back to TechPath. All right, Katie, I want to jump you in here to this conversation so we can kind of get going. First of all, explain PureStake, because I'm not sure everybody understands the relationship between PureStake and what you guys are doing on the network.
Absolutely. We get this question a lot. So PureStake is a company that was founded in early 2019 by a person named Derek Yoo. So Derek has a long kind of successful history as a Web2 entrepreneur and saw an opportunity in the crypto space. And so he kind of leapt in wholeheartedly and was looking for an opportunity to kind of differentiate within the technology side of crypto. And so after 6 to 8 months of looking around the industry, he found Polkadot and he found an opportunity there to build an Ethereum-compatible smart contract platform, which became Moonbeam. So PureStake is the company that builds the technology, and Moonbeam and Moonriver, which is a sister network, are the networks built by that team.
All right, so good in the sense of, for people that are new here, maybe you're just exploring Polkadot and how parachains work, make sure and check out our videos. We've got a lot of videos on how the parachains work, what the process is, many of the companies that came out of that. Of course, Moonbeam has really kind of shaken it up with both with Moonriver and now with Moonbeam in the essence of Glimmer, the token that's coming out of this project and this network. Talk to me about some of the latest things that are happening with Moonbeam in general, how the project is going, what are some of the big achievements you guys are working on?
Moonbeam launched just last week on January 11th. And so the biggest update there is that Glimmer, the utility token of the Moonbeam network, is now fully transferable and live. So with that announcement, there's a few other things that are new to the Moonbeam network, including collator staking. So with that Glimmer token, you can actually help support the infrastructure of the network by delegating to collators.
And that's with the Glimmer token being able to be staked, correctly?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. All right. What kind of uptake are you seeing on that? Any in terms of on the network itself, in terms of adoption, the community itself? How fast is it growing?
So we actually have an advantage here. So I briefly mentioned Moonriver as a sister network, a sister parachain that was launched mid-year last year. And so that gives us a huge advantage in being able to understand what the trajectory is going to look like as these projects roll out. So I point back to Moonriver in terms of what to expect. So right now on Moonbeam, we've only been out, as of today, about 7-8 days. And so we have a number of DEXs that have deployed. We have these staking capabilities that are part of the core network. But I really look to Moonriver for what to expect from a traction perspective. So Moonriver is by far the most active smart contract platform on the Kusama network, which for those who are unfamiliar is the same concept, right? It's a sister network to Polkadot. And so we have seen, we very quickly, I think, went to 10 million transactions within a couple of months on that network. We see dozens of projects deployed there, DEXs, lending and borrowing, of course, all the core infrastructure that you'd expect. And so what we see happening on Moonbeam is that those same projects are deploying, but faster. And so we fully expect that within the coming weeks, we will have a number of these kinds of dApps that you're expected to see on any EVM-compatible smart contract platform on Moonbeam as well.
Yeah, I think for our audience, and I want to just remind everybody, if you guys jump over to moonbeam.network, you can jump onto their blog. And what Katie's talking about is that they actually have some tutorials on this, so you can actually get into the Glimmer side of things and really kind of understand a little bit more as you start to look into this project as a whole, if it's something you want to participate in. Obviously, this is just one of the tool sets that they're providing. Would you guys do a great job, I think, of educating the public on how all of this works, which is one of the things that I found in some projects that they usually are a little bit more lacking in, is that, that front-facing education that a lot of users and community actually need. So kudos to you guys in terms of being able to get that out. Katie, talk to me about Crosschain, the functions and features of what you guys are trying to do with your new tech.
Sure. This actually ties a little bit back to Polkadot and how Polkadot's designed. So for those who aren't aware, Polkadot is what they call themselves a layer 0, a meta
Hmm.
protocol, but really they're a way for independent layer 1 chains to connect to each other. And so as part of that value prop, it's really important that we start to do that. And so for Moonbeam and Moonriver, we've actually made kind of the first advancement, the first release of technology in that regard, right now on Moonriver, coming soon to Moonbeam. And so with that, we've nicknamed it XC20. So what is an XC20? It's an ERC20 that is capable of moving across parachains, across Kusama for now, but soon Polkadot as well, and interacting with these other chains that are connected to Polkadot in a very rich way. So I think we're all kind of used to the concept of tokens moving across bridges. This is sort of akin to that, but this is where all of these chains that are connected into what we're calling the .sama ecosystem, referring to both Kusama and Polkadot. This is where we see a lot of really rich interactions start to take place, and we expect, this will only kind of continue to become kind of richer over time as more functionality is added in.
I was just looking at some of the release information that you had in here. Can you explain a little bit more about the HRMP channel, how that works between
Sure.
Moonriver and StateMine?
Yeah, we'll have an announcement on this very shortly, but essentially we've been working on an HRMP channel, and I won't dive too much into the kind of the tech end of things, but essentially this is a bridge not just from the main chain, which is on Kusama, it's called the relay chain, but it's actually from another parachain. So we've basically established a bridge between StateMine, which is another parachain, over to Moonriver, and that will allow tokens on StateMine to move over to Moonriver, and that allows you to use it with all of the beautiful apps that have already deployed, right? So all the
Right.
DEXs, all the lending and borrowing and so forth, you'll be able to use tokens from those parachains as these XC20s on Moonriver.
So with that kind of scenario, I mean, because that is truly cross-chain utilization. I think that is really one of the innovations that a lot of people are looking to Moonbeam in general to kind of solve in terms of what we've seen around DeFi, especially in the use case of being able to move tokens from one chain to another. Benefits of this in use case outside the trading ecosystem, where do you see this going for Moonbeam in terms of, use case protocol, functionality within real world? What are some of the solutions you might see this actually deploy in?
So, I mean, in the short term, you can use these assets on apps that aren't necessarily where the core asset originated. So just to draw that through, so we have this StateMine parachain in the Kusama ecosystem. And the asset that we've kind of been discussing, and we'll have an announcement about this very shortly, but this channel was set up to help the Remark token kind of move to the Moonriver ecosystem. So there's very pragmatic use cases for that now, where you can use apps that are on different parachains regardless of where your token is originally located. And I think that's kind of the core benefit for now. But over time, what we expect to see is, Polkadot's created this architecture where you can have all these parachains specialized for different purposes. And so once those purposes kind of become clear and each, is kind of a richer ecosystem, whether, you've specialized in DeFi or EVM compatibility or storage or whatever you've chosen, you can actually start to see these parachains interact with each other. And from a user perspective, that will give you kind of the best of both worlds. You'll be able to leverage lots of different kinds of functionality without having to worry about bridging tokens back and forth.
Yeah, as far as the live rollout, when you guys were going live, any issues that you see? Because we've seen everything from network congestion, we've seen all sorts of challenges with different kind of projects out there over the past few weeks, just in starting to roll out. With your tech and kind of what you're trying to do in terms of bringing these projects live, what are some of the challenges that you're prepping for as you start to scale?
So again, point to Moonriver as a great way for us to learn about a lot of these things. So we actually did see quite a bit of usage on Moonriver, which allowed us to kind of go ahead and add some performance improvements. There will still be some kind of performance improvements coming from the relay chain itself. So that's what's built by the Parity team, Polkadot and Kusama. So we're working with them directly to make sure some of those get through, but we only expect performance to kind of continue to improve over time. We're referring to the current state as sort of a limited state where, the transaction throughput and those sorts of things will only continue to improve and speed up. With that in mind, though, in terms of the rollout itself, we actually had a much, much shorter rollout than we did previously for Moon River. So these are not overnight activities. I think we completed the Moonbeam launch in 3.5 weeks, whereas Moon River, we kind of staged it over 8 weeks. So we took a considerable amount of time to do that. With that in mind, I think one of the things that we talked about internally as being really special about this announcement and this release is that it was relatively uneventful. There were no issues that came up. Everyone was communicating and kind of rolling it out gradually, and over a series of hours, checked all the boxes and were able to have a relatively smooth release. I think I quoted our CEO, Derek Yoo, on Twitter when he referred to the team as a bunch of stone cold professionals who kind of methodically, step by step, followed this release. And so I think that is really a shift in what we've seen from some networks in the past, where it can be kind of crazy and chaotic and you don't know what to expect. And
Right.
much of that is due to the fact that we've been able to do this before on Moon River.
Yeah, it was definitely a good dress rehearsal for sure, in terms of many people don't get that kind of chance of being able to do something to that scale a second time around. So that's definitely a good point that you guys bring up. Talk to me about the parity teams. You mentioned that because it's interesting to me as projects, both from the parachain auctions themselves, start to deploy on Polkadot. How are those relationships with the core team on Polkadot? Obviously, we've seen the project split with Kusama, which is kind of the relationship here. But I'm just kind of curious how those integrations occur. How do you guys see potential opportunities down the road with continuous expansion of these networks, or kind of curious of what that growth might look like with Polkadot in general?
So, I mean, Parity would probably best be able to speak to Polkadot's kind of long-term growth. But the types of things we've heard from Gavin Wood, who leads that project, is really around kind of this exponential growth. He's looking 5, 10, 20 years in the future.
Right.
Whereas most of the parachain teams are kind of trying to get launched and get some initial traction here. So we're a little bit shorter term in that sense. Though we are, coordinating with them and we have an understanding of what the overall roadmap is. So some of the things that Gavin has shared kind of publicly include a bridge between Kusama and Polkadot, which is really interesting, right? Because a lot of people get confused, like why are there two different networks affiliated with just one code base? And so this would allow them to communicate directly, which I think will be a really interesting development. One of the other things he's talked about is how do we scale beyond 100 parachains? How do we make a network and architecture that can scale to have 10,000 parachains? And so those are the kinds of problems that I think at a high level, they're already, decades in the future in planning. In terms of our relationship with Parity, we do work quite closely with them from a tech perspective in particular. And so just the nature of open source technology and using the Substrate framework very extensively, having really customized it for our use case, which is this Ethereum compatibility. We've had quite a few interactions with the team, but by and large, one of the reasons that we chose Polkadot in the first place is because their tech is very impressive and spectacular.
Right.
And so, we've only been continued to be impressed by their capabilities and their planning and their team in general as we've, grown to work with them more closely.
Yeah. For sure. I know a lot of you out there watching this interview, you're always kind of curious, hey, Paul, what is the kind of situation currently on this particular project? We do data dives and a little bit more insightful analysis on these projects, but just a quick rundown. This was an example of how an investment firm had actually got the sentiment score, I think, wrong on Glimmer, and showing that this was actually a weakening project, when in actuality, it actually overperformed in the market, which is one of the reasons that we asked Moonbeam on the show, is because we were seeing really a lot of sentiment built up on the projects themselves, which usually indicate a lot of these price moves that are happening. But more importantly, what it indicates is a lot of interest from the ecosystem or from the communities that are really interested in what you guys are doing. So we always follow the crowds, because those usually indicate price movement out there. So again, traditional finance wrong. And crypto, the crypto buzz teams are always a little bit more, I think, in tune to what's happening here. Katie, when you look at Polkadot as a whole and where you guys are trying to go, in terms of an overall, achievement within, let's say, 2022, what would be some of the next big milestones that you guys are trying to go for this year?
So I think this is really in line with a couple of things we've already discussed, but our milestones very much tied to Polkadot's milestones, and they're kind of mutually important. So the
Yeah.
first thing to realize is that all this time for the past year and a half that Polkadot's been in operation, they haven't had smart contracts, and so now we see smart contracts starting to emerge, Moonbeam included, but there's other smart contract platforms as well, and that's going to create something I think really interesting in the Polkadot ecosystem as more of these dApp teams are able to deploy. So that is like the first thing to look for. We are directly working with projects that plan to deploy to Moonbeam to make sure that's as seamless as possible. You mentioned before kind of an emphasis on providing support not only to users but developers as well. And so that's something that we've kind of always prioritized, is making that developer experience as smooth and streamlined as possible. So we'll continue to do that. I think for folks who are new to the ecosystem, what you should expect to see is a lot of really interesting projects deploying pretty quickly here in the next quarter or so. Beyond that, I've mentioned this cross-chain stuff a couple of times. It's a little bit difficult to imagine until you can see how that impacts the way that you're using some of these networks. But at the end of the day, I think the easiest to understand way to imagine what this will look like is an entry point like Moonbeam, where you can use the same tools you already have. You can use MetaMask, you can use your 0x H160 style addresses, everything you already are familiar with. But suddenly you can have KSM in there through XT KSM. You can have other kinds of substrate assets in there due to these cross-chain capabilities. And so I think we'll see a lot more people be able to access Polkadot in a way that they couldn't before.
Yeah, I think you just hit on the thing that we've been pointing to all along in the Polkadot ecosystem, is this ability for Polkadot to really scale with smart contract, integration in a very quick point of time, with what we've seen both on the Kusama network and then obviously with Moonbeam and what you guys are doing. This is a huge, in my opinion, a huge bullish sign toward what we're going to see around just Polkadot overall as an ecosystem. And I think just all, like you kind of explained, is a lot of developers have been looking at going in that direction, and now they've got a reason to really kind of point in and hone in on either one, developing dApps and really going after a much more aggressive approach toward where the future might go in terms of Polkadot itself. Last question for you, Katie, and that is, when you look at the developers, the ecosystems are out there, everybody's kind of fighting for, I wouldn't say fighting, but definitely competing for really great developer communities to kind of jump into their projects. What is it that draws developers to you, and why is it so different?
So, I mean, not to sound like a broken record here, but it is the combination of this Polkadot architecture that allows for kind of these cross-chain capabilities, plus the easiest entry point. So I've mentioned a few times EVM compatibility. There's a lot of people that kind of define themselves as EVM compatible. In our definition, that is, we call it as Ethereum-like as possible. And so what that means is we've sort of gone into the native substrate architecture, ripped out addresses, signatures, anything that would create this duality between substrate and Ethereum that would kind of have a negative impact on the user experience. And we've instead standardized on whatever it is that Ethereum has done. So in this case, we use MetaMask, which is the most popular browser wallet. We use Ethereum style addresses. And so that just makes it a lot simpler to get in. And that's not an experience that everyone offers when they claim kind of EVM compatibility.
Yeah, I think you hit it right there on the head, and that is the experience scenario that needs to occur, especially around what we're seeing in terms of adoption for cryptocurrencies in general, onboarding, and the ability to get into mass adoption. You do have to make it, projects need to make things easier for the masses to go into. Obviously, if you're watching our show, you're an early adopter. You're probably a tech enthusiast or someone that's been in crypto for a long time. But for the new people, a lot of times their first entry is a traditional exchange. They don't get a chance to get into these substrates and these other projects that really are pretty interesting and definitely are great investments in terms of opportunity. So onboarding, huge, huge deal for the future of where all of this is going, for sure. Hey, Katie, it's been great having you on the show today. We definitely are going to be watching you guys very closely because we're interested in how this is going to develop. And I can't wait to see some of the dApps that start to deploy on Moonbeam, for sure.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure.
Excellent. All right, you guys are tuned in over on the podcast right now. Make sure and give us some stars over there. We'd love to get your feedback. But of course, the number one place to really jump into a lot of these types of interviews, as well as our analysis to where we break down our crypto power index, is right here on YouTube. And of course, that is just at Paul or search Paul Barron Network. Of course, if you want to reach out to me, it's over on Twitter at Paul Barron. We'll catch you next time right here on TechPath.